raised in Istanbul, came to the United States in 1981. She has a degree in information technology, master's degree in library science. She worked in academic libraries and later public libraries as branch manager in St. Louis, Missouri, until she retired in 2018. She has published 5 books. They can be found in academic libraries. Rose Cohen speaks Turkish, English, Judeo-Spanish, Hebrew, and French. We're excited to listen to you, Rose. Microphone is yours.
Right. Yes, as I was just beginning to talk about the origins of the Jews. Most of you know that. The religion or all monotheistic religions or the Christian, Judeo-Christian religions, they all originated in this area, Middle East. So as the Jews, and the Jews have a calendar, which is 5,000 and so old, which is also before Christ, basically, that we know that the religion existed. And of course, there's the legend of the Jews having built the Egyptian pyramids, and then they crossed the Red Sea and they moved to Palestine. So it seems like they lived this tribal life in that area for quite a while. And around the time that the Christianity is about to be born, the Romans are there. And of course, we know also from what the Christian religion coming to light, there were lots of conflicts there, and Romans started exiling the Jews from Palestine. So the Jews started leaving apparently before BC, maybe 2-3 centuries before that, and I would say that they arrived. They were all there. There are signs that the Jews have lived in the Asia Minor, Anatolia, as old as before Christ or a century or two after Christ. I have a small thing from the family that I consider very treasure. My parents used to scare me with St. Paul, basically. And that's how I came to the conclusion that they must be Romanios, meaning the first Jews that settled in the Anatolia, in Asia Minor and Anatolia. Of course, the Jews had, now that they have really found signs of history in all the way the West, in Ephesus, Side, before the Ottomans arrived, they were already in Bursa, some of them, and so on. And so they called these the Romanios because they were the remnants, or they were under the rules of the Byzantine Empire, which was the Eastern Roman Empire. And when the Ottomans, as you know, came, they slowly progressed towards Istanbul with the intention of course, the conquest of Constantinople, Istanbul. And when that happened, 1453, Fatih, what they used to do when you conquer a land, you bring people to fill the cities and so on. So a lot of those Anatolian people were brought to Istanbul, not only to Istanbul, even on the other side of the Balkans, to Edirne, to some of the Greek lands in here. Actually, there is a town in Greece up to date that they identify themselves as Romanian Jews. Yanina or Ionia has a very distinct Now, the ones in Istanbul is hard to differentiate because they mixed with the rest, which we'll talk about who else came. So as you can see, with this exile, not only did they come through to Anatolia and move to Southern Europe, they also spread out to Northern Africa and consequently ended up in Iberian Peninsula, which by then
Rose, we cannot hear you. I think you're muted.
did I mute myself?
Okay,
No.
okay. I hear you now.
Okay, so I talked about those dates a little bit, and those Jews that already lived in Asia Minor. And of course, they were Greek-speaking Jews. Those the same Romanio Jews are Greek-speaking Jews. So you may wonder now, where did this Judeo-Spanish come from? In the Iberian Peninsula, the Jews arrived around 8th century, or this is when they were maybe incorporated with with Muslims. I just read that Tariq ibn Ziyad was a new Muslim in that day because the Muslim religion only flourished 7th century. So the Jews of Iberia really liked being with the Moors, had a very flourishing life. And they called all those, there were all kinds of faiths living in there. And the non-Muslim members of that were the Jews and maybe other Christians were considered people of the book in Islamic theology. Therefore, they lived well. I mean, they assigned them duties and they paid a certain tax and so on. And they didn't have any other obligations. So that was a period where the Jews in Iberia really flourished, and they lived well. I mean, some of you may know Maimonides is a philosopher and physician. He was writing his works in Arabic, basically, and he was very appreciated by other Arab kingdoms and so on, like in Egypt and so on. And they lived quite in peace till around 1400, 1492. And that's when the Catholic Spain, under the reign of Isabella and Ferdinand, they really wanted to have a Catholic kingdom. And they established this in the Inquisition. And they really wanted to get rid of all the Muslims, and which they did, fought the Muslims and the Moors and so on. But finally, with the Inquisition, they decided that you were either going to accept Christianity, you were leave the place, or be killed. So we know that there were lots of converts, and of course, lots were most likely killed. They even say that they confiscate, of course, their lands and homes and so on of those who left. And that with that money that they sent Columbus in search of the spices and found the new world. So all this is connected. So now, so those expelled Jews are referred to as Sephardic, which Sepharad means Spain in Hebrew. So they're basically that this were referred to as Spaniards. So where would they go? Who wanted them? Let's see. So I mentioned this, that they wanted to unify Spain. They wanted to get rid of everyone else. They did also apply the same rules to the Moors and the Muslims, and they founded Christopher Columbus. And at the same time, the Ottomans were advancing in Asia Minor, and they had conquered Constantinople in 1953. So the Ottoman Empire is a brand new empire. Constantinople is just declared the capital, and they've brought some of the Romanio Jews in. Not only the Romanio Jews, other Greeks and other local people that lived in around, not only to Istanbul, but they also spread them to the Balkan lands and so on. At this time, they invited those Spaniards that were being kicked out of Spain. This was Ikinci Beyazıt, son of Fatih, is the one who invited them, and they really wanted to, they believed that this is a good group of people that could elevate the Ottoman Empire. It seemed like the Ottomans were not interested of doing clerical works and merchantry and so on. So this was a good group. The ones coming from Spain would take those jobs. So let's see now how those two groups of Jews mixed or didn't mix. The Romania Jews that are around, they were instrumental in inviting the Sephardic Jews, and but they were really, their royalty was with the Greeks, with the Byzantines. They were usually poorer. Of course, Byzantine was fighting for decades against the Turks. So their citizens were poor, uneducated, and they kept their own traditions. You could tell a little bit of that from their names, and because they had Greek last names, such as Galimidi, Romano. Givre means Jew in Greek. Antigone, I know people with this last name that lived in the neighborhoods I lived. Then the Sephardic Jews were definitely more favored by the Ottoman palace because they were serving the administration and they had many skills. Of course, they could speak Arabic and Spanish and what else did they speak? And Hebrew, most likely. And they had skills, they were more educated. And this is how the Spanish arrived in the Ottoman Empire. The first few, about 4 centuries, the Romania Jews and the Sephardic Jews did not mix together. They each lived their own little thing. But eventually, by the 17th century, they mixed, and to this day, you cannot tell anymore, except there's a little bit of remnants in the names. Frankly, because one of my grandfathers was Romano, and because my parents scared me with some Pablo, I think that we were Romanio, and they never spoke of any connection to Spain or anything like that. And I know some Sephardic families do that. They too, the Sephardic Jews have Spanish last names. Again, it's never purely, you can't tell that they're purely Sephardic, but their names mean, such as Toledo. I've known people last name Toledo, Nasi, Gerona, Behar, and so on. So this separation continued the same way And but that fake language that they brought from Spain didn't stay the way it was. It was a 15th century Spanish, but obviously it was far away from where it belonged. I mean, I think there are, I think it's a bit unique. I'm not sure if there are many situations like this, that an oral language survives in a different land when the population is not very large. I mean, like Spaniards came to the New World, obviously they brought Spanish, but it was already a more developed culture, and they could maintain in a real sense. Whereas the Spanish that was spoken by the Jewish population, and that the Romanians finally learned and started communicating with it, was purely oral with few exceptions. Very few people knew how to write. Obviously, the women were not even expected to do more than middle school, or like my mother's generation. I know that they were expected to. If they went till 8th grade, that was considered an educated girl. So obviously, they never learned to write Salutria or Rashid, which was the only way this Judeo-Spanish was written by the rabbis or by the learned there. And the Jewish, till the close to the establishment of the Republic, under the Ottoman auspices, they just had their own autonomy like all other minorities, small minority groups. They paid a certain tax, and they had that kind of freedom to stay in their own culture and do their own thing. And as I said, because the Ottomans in early centuries of the Ottoman didn't care to do merchantry, teaching, or clerical work, the Jews started doing this work. And I would say that mainly it was the Sephardic Jews, and the Romanian Jews were probably just helpers. They also lived in central neighborhoods, had schools and synagogues. And if I to say, the historic peninsula of Istanbul, that's where majority of Muslims lived. And a lot of the Jews that later came, including the Sephardic and previously all others, they were settled in Balat, in Haskö, some in Ortaköy, some in Kuşkuncuk, in different places. And I know that by the 19th century, they had already started moving to what we know today as Galata. So my grandfather was born in Haskö, and they have an interesting story where at one point they go to, for a year or two, they go to Belgium, then they come back and they settle in Galata. Is anybody here that doesn't know where Galata is? Is where the Galata Tower is. Historically, this was where minorities and foreigners lived, that area. So the Jews also lived there. By the time I was born in that neighborhood, very late 1949, I was born in 1949. This was already a poor looking neighborhood. And every time I go and visit Istanbul, I'm surprised and see it full of tourists, and it's beautiful, it's clean, and all. That's not how it was when I lived there. So with the establishment of the Turkish Republic, that's when, in my opinion, the language was hit, because it was no longer functional, basically. But then my parents, for example, were born during the Ottoman Empire. They didn't have a decent school that they could learn Turkish. So they both spoke broken Turkish, but they knew French because in the 19th century, the European French decided that the Eastern Jews are very ignorant, so they established French schools, Alliance Universelle Française, in between, and those survived until the end of the First World War, basically, those French schools. And that's why the Jews were speaking French. Someone who knows French well told me that the French they spoke was as good as the Spanish they spoke, but I'm not to judge that. But when Turkey became a republic, suddenly it was a new type of living. I know that Istanbul, population in Istanbul, and were fascinated. They just loved the idea that now you were part of the country, you were gonna go get education. I know my mother was just extremely happy that what she couldn't do, her daughters could do, and so on. And then suddenly the women's role has changed. You didn't have to, wasn't enough to have eighth grade education and wait for the husband and all this. So those, they themselves learned Turkish in what was called Halkevi, which was like a public home for adults to learn Turkish. That was a novelty that Atatürk brought. So, and my generation is the product of this. I was born after the Republic. But at home, I continued to hear Judeo-Spanish. The more our generation became fluent in Turkish, and our education was in Turkish. Another interesting thing is when Atatürk had asked the minorities whether they wanted to have like a private school that they could teach their own culture and so on. The Greeks and the Armenians chose that. The Jews decided they wanted to be part of the public Turkish ministry. Therefore, even though the school I went to was called Jewish school, sometimes people ask me, weren't they teaching you Judeo-Spanish? No, nobody was teaching Judeo-Spanish. The truth is, you couldn't really teach Judeo-Spanish because it wasn't standardized in any way. So you'd have to standardize it all together. No one ever wrote anything about it except maybe some liturgical writings and so on. There wasn't an alphabet, so there's really no way of teaching it. So it continued to be where the elderly spoke Judeo-Spanish at home with the Greek words and the Hebrew words in it. And I personally remember, not only myself, but everyone else around me, we as kids heard this Judeo-Spanish till whatever age, 5 or 6. Once we started going to school, we did not like to speak it. And I think this is a phenomenon you see immigrant children probably experience the same thing. If some of you came to the United States and your kids probably after a while wouldn't want to speak Turkish unless there was a grandparent or something. And that's exactly what happened. That we weren't interested. Parents continued frustratingly to talk because they didn't know any better. Something finally happened in 1992. Started big celebrations in Istanbul. I think it wasn't just Istanbul, probably Israel and Spain as well. In 1992, they decided that it was the quincentennial that the Spaniards, the Sephardim, the Jewish Spaniards, arrived, and they wanted to maybe also politically use it to say how the Jews lived 5 centuries, and they did. And so they wanted to celebrate this. There were some very good programs and so on. And this date became like a turning point. I happened to be visiting there. I didn't live in Istanbul anymore. I happened to be visiting there. And suddenly it's like, whoa, it was all because of us. Now nobody wants to talk this language. We did hear it, yes, but we didn't teach it to our kids. No one else did. And I think it was like, I've kind of felt responsible a bit. So, and at the time, I wasn't the only one. Many people among the Jews started writing poetry, doing theaters in Istanbul and in Spain. Of course, Spain had also the linguists in Spain also found it interesting. They said, well, you guys refrigerated our language in time, 15th century Spanish. You added the new, words and so on, but a lot of it is the medieval Spanish. And I also read that the Spanish language was one with the Portuguese language in those centuries, so that a lot of times they were like, oh, you're using a Portuguese word and so on. And we didn't even know that we were using Portuguese. We didn't know we were using Greek words and so on. But I felt like, okay, well, maybe of course, can't say just I, because there were so many people that I need to mention. They were really so enthusiastic about this. One, of course, some of you may know Rachel Bortnik, and Gad Nassi. They are just, it's interesting because they're about 10 years older than me, but they remember the language even better. But they were all good orators, and they really did a lot of work with that. They started the Jewish newspaper and so on in Istanbul, and they did endless works, and there's quite a few other people in Istanbul. But the truth is, nobody, except for like the few that write essays or write in different places, poetry, essays, stories, but there aren't many who write books. I guess it takes more effort. So that's when I had started writing stories about my childhood. And Rufat Bali, some of you may know him. He's a publisher in Turkey who mainly publishes books about the history of minorities in Turkey. He was the first one to offer me to publish those stories. And since then, I mean, I've been writing, and basically I try to capture the language the way I heard it then, because every language kind of reflects the entire culture. And this particular language being just an oral language, and also archaic. There's a lot of cliches and sayings in it. So I thought this was an interesting thing that needs to be captured. I'll talk a little bit about the books. This was the first book, and I thought it's all the stories that already had appeared. So I write about the Istanbul of the 1950s, the Galata Tower district, and the people I knew there growing up, which majority were Jewish. And even though I didn't really live inside the, which is Büyük Hendek Caddesi, that drives to the Galata Tower, I was just across the street in Shishane. So we constantly visited the Galata Tower. All our neighbor, relatives, cousins lived there. So we loved going there. And for example, I have a story about my mom's aunt. Her name was Sarina. And Sarina lived in this little place in Galata, near the Galata Tower. And this is my mother and I coming to visit her. I was never happy coming because it bored me the way they spoke Spanish and got excited. And it's at times when the words weren't sufficient, I drew those pictures. As you can see, I really wanted to show that it was a poor widowed lady so that lived in one of those old apartments. This story is also about us celebrating the Purim celebration. This was my mom's bedroom. I also wanted to show that we were not, most people there were not rich or well-to-do. This was my mom's bedroom. And as you can see, right behind her is the washing machine in her bed. And she had picked up this scroll that was the Purim story, and she was sharing it with us. I did write a little bit about school stories, about the teachers. The teachers, about half of them were Jewish. And but you know, and it was a boys and girls school together. I wrote another story about my mom and dad, their specialties, what they like to cook and so on. My father liked to bake things. My father was more of Balkan origin. Parents were from Varna and from Silivri. And as I said, even though we had this little tiny kitchen, old apartment, they seemed to manage in there. Sometimes, you see today we have those huge kitchens, but they managed to do quite nice dishes and so on in that little kitchen. And this is the story about the building I lived in. And here is the custodian whose granddaughter I discovered lately. And he was so working so hard and take care of this old building. I think at the time he and his family were the only Muslim family in the building. But by the end of the 60s, the Jews had already moved to bigger and better neighborhoods in Istanbul, and not as concentrated as they were in Galata Tower. And of course, this is where the building existed. It collapsed on a day that the construction of the metro, apparently the building was really old and the building collapsed. To this day, I go and check it every time nothing has been built. My second book, I decided to write about the stories that my parents used to tell me, because we were a very small family. My mom didn't have siblings. My dad had one sibling that died young. So my mother in particular really told us a lot of stories of people I didn't know, but they had several very nice photographs. This is my mother when she was 6 years old. It's 1916. So it's Ottoman era. And she was sent to a German school in Istanbul. These are really difficult years for all Ottoman residents of Istanbul. And what I did is with those stories, some of you will see that I took sayings that they used and I arranged the story according to the saying. And I forgot to mention, all my books are in 2 languages. Everything that I write in Judeo-Spanish, I translate as the best of my ability to English. Some of you may recognize some of those things. And some of you that know Spanish may understand what this is all about. These were all stories that my parents told me. Some of them that are really funny is, I don't know, Callades por mol inglés means just be quiet because the British are watching. This is typical of the occupation years where the city was occupied, 1922, 21, 22, I believe. It's not a very long period, but I think this saying just popped up then when the British had occupied. And then another good saying was, Va-t'en, va quitte la Turquie. If you think in terms of French, it means just go away, leave Turkey alone. But the truth is that Va-t'en is the name of a newspaper. Vakit is the name of a newspaper in Turkish, and so is La Turquie. So when the newspaper selling boys used to yell out, Va-t'en, Vakit, La Turquie, they were really saying, go away, leave us alone to the French and the British. Then I described my grandmother's life. Most of these people I never met. It's all by stories that my mother told us. And, they lived in the same apartment. People lived in poor conditions. This cousin was burnt in a house fire. Story of her. I talk about the tramways that were pulled by horses. And as I was doing some research on these stories, I discovered all kinds of interesting things. First World War, that's when electricity started coming to Istanbul. And why did they choose that time? Because they needed the horses to go to where the battles were taking place. So they had to choose between horses pulling the trams or pulling them out and using them for the battles. I mean, I thought they would have a different reason to bring electricity to town, but that was the reason. And here is the one that you have to be quiet no matter how much you suffered. You shouldn't show it to the English. Here is a photo of my paternal grandmother, who's from Varna. You could almost see the clothing is different. So, but those that lived in Varna and my grandfather that lived in Silivri, they came to Istanbul again because there was so much suffering and occupations between the Greeks and the Bulgarians. 1912, and I think they came in 1905. That's where they married. One of the brothers was apparently very lucky, and he was adventurous. So I have his story. He goes to Sweden, marries a Swedish lady, has a very nice family, and so on. And apparently, he even sold the Swedish king Turkish carpets. That was historically told. And here is the Romano grandfather. That's the youngest photo of him I have. And I thought it was, I wrote a story about him and the photograph because the photograph is taken by Abdullah Fer, who was one of the most famous photographers of Abdul Hamid. And Abdul Hamid had the Abdullah friend take photos of entire Istanbul because he was interested to modernize and show the Europeans about Constantinople and so on. So this book is really like a prequel to my first book. And that's when mostly they spoke only Judeo-Spanish. Another cousin of the family after the Republic was established, he moved to Torino thinking that he'll do well there. But then the Nazis came and they ended up in North Africa. They had a very tough life. They survived, but I didn't meet this little boy when he was an old gentleman. And he told me that it was a bat mitzvah picture. He didn't have that picture. So I have a story of this one. I thought I wanted to show you this picture. The young lady is my mother. The year on this photograph is 1926, so it's just the beginning of the Republic. I know that they had very limited income, but it always amazes me to see how they dressed well. So, no, I think a grandmother was a seamstress, but I thought she's dressed so modern and so on, even though they had very limited means. Something else that the Republic brought to the Jews, the new freedoms. Here's my father, and this is the Jewish school. This Jewish school is no longer in Galata. This is the same school I went to because the new school now is in Ulus, which is a much nicer neighborhood. And they had this basketball team called Maccabi, I in the 1930s. I think it had become famous. It was well known. The next book that I wrote is talking about myself. I'm there with my grandsons, and I just compare myself to my grandmother from Varna, some good, some bad. So it's kind of biographical. And again, all of them are in English, and then I describe the way we left, and then I describe the way I miss the neighbors and the people that was part of the community, how the fashions changed, that I'm Istanbul is always in my mind. This book I wrote with a friend. My friend Betty spent all her childhood in Balat. And she remembers it so well because her father was a rabbi in Balat. She was one of the last Jews that left the neighborhood of Balat. And she really thinks that it was beautiful life because neighbors and friends and family always lived together and did everything together. She told us also a story of how her mother, she has an older sister, Betty. Her mother, the older sister, wasn't getting sleepy at night. So she would put her on a boat with a boatman, cross the Golden Horn, then she would get sleepy. So that was the routine every day to put her to sleep. I've heard that people do that, put their children in the car and drive them. So that was different. And then how they lived together with grandparents. I think that generation that lived with grandparents really enjoyed hearing the language and learning it better. How they kept the food in wells, but you know, they didn't have a luxury life, but it seemed to be quite fun to me. So the seamstress days where everyone came and helped with each other. The last book that I published is an interesting story, and many people don't know this. It's about a cousins that left from Silivri. A big group of Jews left Silivri in 1923, and they went to Havana, Cuba. And they spent there, I think, from 1920s to 60s, the beginning of Castro regime. Most of these people were, when they made it to Cuba, they really depended on this Judeo-Spanish. That's what made it for them. But they were mainly peddlers, or they had little shops. But the change in the regime didn't work for them well. So most of them aren't there. Only very few older Jews, I think about 1,000 Jews living still from Turkish origin are still there. And the reason I wrote this story is because I knew only their photographs of these people, these cousins and so on. And with a DNA test, I found them all. Luckily, they had sent us pictures, and I knew their names, I knew the dates, and I found them all. So I thought that would made a nice little story of their lives, what made them come. I did some research, what was going on in Silivri in those years, and so on. But you can see also that those the adult kids in the family were born in Istanbul. This is dated 1925. I don't think you see it here. But the Spanish they're writing is also kind of a mix of real Spanish they're learning and the old Judeo-Spanish. And here are just mentioned 4 of the books. If anybody wants to see or look at the book, I would recommend them. You could go to your public library, and most public libraries have an interlibrary service. And because a lot of the academic libraries have them, you can check them out. And then you can decide if it's of any interest to you. Because as I said, it's short stories, it's not big books. Only someone maybe who's interested in the language may find it interesting. The paperbacks. That was the last. If anybody wants my email, wants to write to me, if they really, really want to buy them, go to Amazon, sells them. So that's the publisher. Any questions?
Thank you so much. I have one question. You can unmute yourself or type in the chat box if you have any questions. But I have a couple of questions. I think you mentioned that your parents were born in Ottoman Empire in Anatolia, right?
No, they were born in Istanbul. I'm just
which is
I
Anatolia.
was talking that yeah, they were born in Istanbul. No, my mother was born in Haskell, and so are her parents and so on. It's just that you wonder, how did they get there? I mean, I can't even imagine when, because Jews were in Anatolia 1,000 years, probably. So maybe they were exiled when the Ottomans came, and maybe they I mean, it has to be how many generations? I can't even think straight. 50 generations from 1940. Uh, some of them apparently were already in the area as Byzantine Jews. But I think that the others also were parents, father's side were in the Balkans. They were, but that was Ottoman Empire too. So.
And you lived a quiet time in Turkey too, right? You spent a quiet time in Turkey.
I was 34. Yeah.
Uh, as a Jewish person in Turkey and US, you know, you're an immigrant like we are in US.
Mm-hmm.
Have you had any disadvantage or disadvantage as a Jewish person in Turkey and in Turkey and in the United States?
I mean, in Turkey, I did not feel it the way I felt it here, but what I felt here was probably being an immigrant. In Turkey, you know what? I just worked in several places. I never felt that I was different. Nobody ever asked me. I don't know why. Maybe I was hanging around people, like-minded people. I mean, really, no one ever asked me, "What are you? Why is your name?" No one ever asked me. I never felt anything while I was in.
Really good.
But here, I still hear it. They hear my accent. As for the Jewish people, they're lost. When you tell them I'm Jewish from Kiev, from Istanbul, they just walk away. I think it's because they don't know there's a country. I don't know, but no, here I'm lost.
Rose, for all those years of experience you have as an immigrant in the United States and as a successful person here, what would you recommend us for? Like I've been here for 23 years. I would say I'm a newcomer. I'm still a newcomer. What would you recommend us to be successful in the United States?
Well, I really didn't have I don't think I had the best opportunities, but I think some of it was personal. I'm not blaming everything else around me, but I was married then. We moved a lot because of the ex-husband's job. Now, I think moving is very detrimental in the United States. You really you have to dig the roots, and then because of the type of jobs he was looking, we were ending up in small places and so on. So I would say if you can stay in bigger cities, and, don't move too much unless you must. That's the only thing I think was hurtful. You know, that if you move, you're starting all over zero.
I see. If anyone has a question, please unmute yourself, or you can type in the chat box so you can.
Right. Speak now.
I think Sibel has a question. I see her hand.
Yes, thank you. So I'm interested about your DNA testing and how you find your cousins in Havana. So also they remember all their past, because I think they were second generation in Havana. So I am so interested about this reunion.
Yes. The thing is, I'm going to be frank about it. This uncle, this little book, they sent a lot of photographs and they wrote the backs of it. They literally, in the photographs, they told their lives. So I was a kid, I write in this book. I was whatever, 3-4 years old. I always liked to look at.
I'm sorry, Rose, could you unmute yourself one more time? Sorry, I was trying to ask everyone to unmute if they have a question. I
Yes,
muted
yeah,
you
I
when
was just, I
you
think
speak.
I started. I always, as a small child, I loved to look at old photographs. So these people had left Istanbul 20 years before I was born. So I didn't know any of them. But it's what I say in the book as well. I was fascinated by those wedding photos they sent and the fact that they always had dates on it. It said Havana. And when I was a little girl, I think my parents talked about it. Imagine that, these people had left 20 years ago, and it was my father's uncle who left. And just, I think, because I've seen those photographs so many times and I knew the names, I was fascinated by them. Then I'll be frank, as a young adult, there was a lot of interest in Cuba. We talked about Turkey. In Turkiye, we talked about Cuban history and Fidel Castro, and most of us were fascinated by that. And, so that may have kept my thing alive, and I didn't forget that we had relatives that went to Cuba. And of course, when my parents got older, they didn't talk as much about them. It was, like, how much can you talk about it? So when I came here, I did have an aunt. Now she's passed away. I did ask her, "Have you found them?" And she said, "No. How is she gonna find them anyway?" So I had given up. But this interest in Havana and Cuba, Jews in Havana, Jews from Turkey in Havana, Turkiye. And then there was a professor that used to, when I worked in one of the academic libraries, there was a professor that used to go very often. And then he told me that there is a little Jewish community there, Sephardic, and there's about 1,000 of them. Then we discovered that the ambassador in Havana was from Robert College, so we wrote to him. We sent him a book. So this somehow it kept alive. I don't know why. As I said, it could be because of the fascination about Cuba and so on. And then finally, I mean, when was it? About 5 years ago, my daughter said, "I'm just gonna send you a gift, DNA test and so on." So when you get this DNA test, I don't know if you had it, they keep sending you names. This person is your third cousin, fifth cousin. And then I realized I had 1,400 cousins in the United States, but I can't even figure out where they came from. Anyway, I wrote to a couple, nothing came out of it, except one European cousin. Yeah, he was very still in touch. But after a while, this guy writes to me. He says, "We're cousins, and my name is," he told me his name, but these people are third generation. They're the grandchildren of this uncle.
Mhm.
I said, the first thing I asked, "Are you guys from Cuba?" And he said, "Yes." And I said, "You have someone named Jenny?" And that was it. I
Unbelievable.
knew that.
It is fascinating.
Yes, and I wrote to them. They were very nice about it. One of the younger ones, we met. She came to Missouri. Then they invited me to Houston. They all live in Houston. And the older cousins were fascinated. We met. I stayed with them one night. And she's the one who designed the page, the cover.
Unbelievable.
She's
Yeah,
an
it is
artist.
so unique. I would like
Yes.
to read this book. So I
Yes.
love this story.
Yes, it's a good little story. And as I said, because it's both languages, it's really not a big book. I mean,
and do you know, you were so attached to your roots, so you were aware and then you connected, so it is really so amazing.
Yes, but they felt the same way. It's amazing. I'm gonna say something that none of them are Jewish anymore, because when they were in Havana, most of them assimilated into the South American commerce, and they married Catholics but their culture is just like us. So they're very sweet people, very friendly. And to this day, of course, I write to them. And I told her, she's an artist. So I asked her, so you can see, this is Turkey. The tree is Turkey. And then the leaves is the different countries we all ended up, the entire family.
Thank you. And by the way, I tried to find you on LinkedIn right now, but there are so many Rose Cohens. I couldn't find you.
You know what? Written the Turkish way, I think maybe there is one more. There are many. Roz, Kohen.
Yeah, because in LinkedIn, I try to find you right now, and then I put Rose Cohen and so many.
Even in LinkedIn, but not written like this with K, with
yeah, it's exactly R-O-Z and then Kohen, Kohen. I find like my first one, so many other people. Oh. So I couldn't find you. Just FYI.
Well, here is my email. I can, if you write, I can give you any information you need.
I have a question. May I ask?
Sure.
Yes. You have, after the Israel established in 1948, gradually a lot of the Jews from Istanbul, Izmir, and so forth have transferred or migrated to Israel. Do you have an idea what the population was of Istanbul Jews or Jews overall in Turkey before and after this immigration?
I'm not sure I remember it very well, but at the high point, I think the population may have been 70,000. But when Israel was established, I think all the poor Jews left. One of my stories is about that, about the poor aunt that moved to Israel and how all the Jews idealized, and how they were saying, oh, there are great opportunities in Israel. We hope for something better. And I think after that, probably it did drop to 30. Right now, I would say it's 12,000. A lot of the younger Jews, not necessarily to Israel, but a lot are going to different countries.
Thank you.
More or less, that's the numbers. It's constant. Not right now. It's constant.
Well, everything that you told us about was such a work of love, and the love of your family. You can see it, how you remember it so fondly as a child. I was very touched by it.
Maybe it is a little bit of an immigrant mentality. I don't know. But I find comfort in the past.
Yeah. So I wanted to say something also to Rose. So I was born in Galata Tower, just in front of Galata Tower, and went to school there. And after that, graduate. Murat asked you a question. It was very interesting for me. How you feel there? How I feel there was very normal. Everything was like everybody's doing the same thing, going to French school or going to American schools. But when I came here to United States, I started to feel very weird because they asked me, you were born in Turkey? Oh, yes, I was born in Turkey, but you are a Jewish girl. Yes, I'm a Jewish girl. And how can be you speak French? Because I went to Catholic school, French Catholic school, and they were just turning their eyes, says, wow, what is that? See, it was very normal for us to do.
Yes,
all
it was. I mean, when you come here, you realize what a cosmopolitan city Istanbul is. I mean, it's just amazing. You're not going to find, I don't think you can even find it in New York or anywhere else.
But in Turkey was very normal for us. When I came here, they started. And the other thing was very weird for me that we talk always with Rachel Bornik. And so when I came here, Sephardic girl that grew up in Latino language and all those things. So they invite me Passover night or Rosh Hashanah night for a dinner. And they said, gefilte fish. I said, what is that? I don't know. And they asked me, okay, latkes. I don't know. What are you talking about it? Or matzo ball soup. And they said, are you Jewish?
You know, they look at you with suspicion. I know.
Yes, that was very weird for me to feel in United States, but I feel it there, like everybody is doing the same thing, and I do the same. So that's I wanted to tell them.
I know, that's true. That's exactly the answer. When you're a minority, you're still part of the country. You may think, okay, am I a bit different? But then you hear when we meet people, we don't know exactly who they are, what they are. So it's like, that wasn't the case when you live in your own country. So
after that, I lived here for 35 years. Couple years ago, because everybody were asking me, did you went inside of Galata Tower? No. But it was just in front of us. And a couple of years ago, I went and I said, they were asking, what do you want to see? First thing I wanted to see the side of Galata Tower.
Yes,
and I married there. And I married there in the same house that I was born. And I have my babies there. And then we moved here.
You're going to like some of the stories on the first book.
I know. I will have them.
If you, as I said, go to your public library and let them send you a copy.
Okay. I admire you that all the memories is not in the book. That's wonderful. I wish one day I will do the same thing one day.
You must do that. Not only that, when you read some of them telling about the Galata Tower district, you'll know some of the people I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes. Very nice.
Sibel has a question. Sibel, do you have a question?
Sorry, I don't want to take over, but have you watched Netflix show Club or Kulüp?
Yes, I did 3 times.
It is fantastic. Do you know, the music is just wonderful. So I want to ask you, Esther or the others, what do you think about this one? I was so amazed.
First of all, let me tell you that the rest is coming. There's going to be a second season or third season, I think. That. Second, I really love the settings they made. Then in the film, I saw my cousin there. And I said, is that you? How come there was a scene where they're having Shabbat dinner or something? I said, Albert, are you in the movies? I mean, he's just a shy person who doesn't. And he said, yes, they went around and they invited us. We were doing all this back work, walking in the streets, like that. And of course, it was very nostalgic. I loved it. But the sets, then I was asking him, what was that set? The Beyoğlu set was done very well, really. The old Beyoğlu, just the way we remember it, the way people were dressed and everything. And then he was telling me that there were 2 sets. One was the Beyoğlu, and the other one was inside the club. The club where they worked. And it's almost a true story. You know about that, right? Yeah. What do you think, Esther? Did you watch it too?
Could you unmute yourself, Esther? We can't hear you.
Yes, for me also, it was the same thing because I had some relative, my mom's cousin went through this kind of life and my father also grew up in the Turkiye orphanage.
Oh,
It, it affected me very much to see all the life, how she wanted to help her daughter. And the daughter is always, you know, you are not good mom.
yes.
That's the conditions, you know. Always, I used to have my father the same problem because he grew up in the orphanage before the first war, my grandpa died in the Balkans war. And when he died, and my grandma in Turkiye, so four kids. And, you know, on that time, if the military won't help, nothing. It was only the Jewish community start to help four kids. And the young one was 3 years old, something like this. And they put in the orphanage. And my older auntie and Sarah was the older one, and she was beautiful. And always they wanted to marry her, you know. And she used to say, yes, I will marry you, but I have 3 brothers that I have to take with me. And of course, no one wants a bride with the 3 babies coming. But finally, one came and said, okay, bring your brothers and your sister. And they were very happy. And then, you know,
such good stories. You must
the story, and I feel it that they wanted to go to Israel. They have a relation with the Turkish guy, and it's all those things that we used to see all those things around us.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
And some of the disdains that some of them had, all this familiar to us. You
know. One more question. Do you know in that series at Netflix, The Club, one of the main point of the series, the way it started, was the fact that the government had passed the law of varlık vergisi. You are aware of that? Very one way they punish the minorities by taxing their assets. So you know about that, and
definitely
the younger generation here probably is not aware that that was a very unjust tax.
Exactly, but nowadays there are many books about it, so it is out there, and they talk. I've heard programs they talk about it, so they really talk a lot about it. Well, the thing is, you know, when the republic is born, and then there's the 2 world wars right about the same time. Some things it takes time to settle. But the movie was emphasizing that, and the fact that of the 6th, 7th September, which people our age will remember that. If you were in Istanbul, you'll remember it. We all remember that.
Yes, but I also something to say. Is do I have time to say something?
Go ahead, please.
Okay, so in the varlık vergisi also, I grew up. I was born in 1943, so my mom was complaining that she couldn't find the fabric to put cloth on me. You know, they were suffering a lot. No food, no nothing, and they were always complaining. And then when I grew up and I started to read a lot of books and a lot of things, so Europe was killing the Jews.
Exactly.
But thank God that we were in Turkey and we didn't have food. They took the money. I don't know, perhaps was very much pressure from Germany, perhaps because Turkey didn't go to the war. Didn't enter.
Still, I mean, even when it didn't go to the war, poverty was rampant. I mean, really, between 2 world wars.
But we're alive.
Then? Yeah, but who had money then?
We're still alive there, you know, there and the other way, if we was outside of the country, Greece or Bulgaria, we were killed.
Exactly. No,
And
I mean,
also
it doesn't compare. I mean, today
No.
you can look and say, why did they tax the Jews? Okay, it was a mistake. Now they
Yes.
admit to it. So
Yes,
But-
it was a mistake. Of course, was a big
but
mistake.
you know, you have to look at it in the historic content. You know, so what was going on in the rest of the world.
Exactly. That's what I wanted to say. That's when you compare, you said, oh, thank God. But at that time, they were complaining.
Yes. Well, we all complain. I mean, we live here and we all complain.
Of course. Of course.
I just
has a question, I think. Could you unmute yourself, Nilgün Hanım?
I don't have a question, but I wanted to make a comment with the 6 and 7 September crisis. The blame was on the internal minister, Namık Gedik, but Namık Gedik was a best friend of my father. And at that time, I was only 5 years old. And I remember that Namık amca come to our house and was crying that he has nothing to do, he has no control over it, and it was he was very upset about the blame that has been on him. I just wanted to share this.
O devirde biliyor musunuz, İstanbul Polis Müdürü benim amcam Alaaddin Eriş. Namık Gedik'in de çok samimi dostuydu.
Onu bilemiyorum ama Namık amcanın ağladığını ve babama bu işi ona mal ettiklerine çok üzüldüğünü biliyorum.
Onların hepsini biliyorsunuz Yassıada'ya gönderdiler. Amcam da buna dahildi. Sonra üçünü astılar biliyorsunuz. Zorlu,
evet, şimdi şunu da belirtmek istiyorum. Benim babam koyu CHP'liydi ve Demokrat Parti'nin hışmına uğrayan bir öğretmendi. Nedeni de 1947-48 yılları arasında Tekirdağ Halk Evleri Başkanlığı yapması. Hemen Demokrat Parti 1950 yılında iktidara gelince yaptıkları ilk iş babamın Tekirdağ Namık Kemal Ortaokulu Müdürlüğü'nden Şile Ortaokulu Müdürlüğü'ne tayin etmeleri olmuş. Ben daha doğmadım ama babam Galatasaray Lisesi mezunuydu ve onlara günlük tutma alışkanlığı kazandırılmış. Ben bunu babamın günlüklerinden okuyarak öğrendim. Babam Şile'ye gittiği zaman Şile Ortaokulu denilen yer barakalardan oluşuyor ve müdür odasının çatısı akıyor, hademe leğeni dolup boşaltıyor. O şekilde bir durum. Namık amca bunu duyunca hemen geliyor, diyor ki ben diyor Galatasaray Lisesi müdürü de sınıf arkadaşı babamın Macit Saner. Macit'le konuştum, seni Galatasaray Lisesi'nin ne müdür mavini olarak tayinli çıkartacağım diyor. Babam da o zaman idealist insanları diyeyim, hayır diyor, ben tayin istemiyorum, Macit'le çalışmayı çok isterim ama tayin istemiyorum. Sen bana bir iyilik yapmak istiyorsan git, Başbakanla konuş, Adnan Bey'le konuş, ödenek çıkart, buraya bir ortaokul yapılsın adam gibi diyor. Ve onun üzerine bugünkü Şile'deki Taş Mektep, Namık amcanın direkt Adnan Menderes'le görüşmesi sonunda çıkan ödenekle yapılıyor. Hala o mektep ortaokul olarak kullanılıyor. Bunu kimse bilmiyor babamla Namık amcadan başka.
Bir de provokatörleri engellemek çok zor. Örneğin Atatürk'ün Selanik'teki evi bombalandı diye haber çıkıyor.
Evet.
Ve bu tamamen hani herkese yayılıyor. Şu andaki bizim network nasıl social medya üstünden her şey yayılıyor. Demek ki o dönemde de bir yalan gazete basımı tüm herkesi galyana getirmek için özel yapılmış bir provokasyon. Ne yazık ki.
Evet.
Ve birçok koyun beyinli derdi ona uymuş bir şekilde. Oh, we got hacked.
Hayır değil. Latife Hanım'ın bilgisayarı konuştu.
Aha, sorry. Biraz çünkü şüpheliyim artık o chat mesajdan sonra. Dediğim gibi tamamen yalan bir haber üstüne kurulmuş. Namık Bey hakkında hiçbir bilgim yok ama kurbanlı olması çok olası bu provokasyon haberler sebebiyle.
Evet, ben kendi çevreme elimden geldiği kadar anlatıyorum bunu. Çünkü bir nevi olaya tanık olduğum için bunu kendime görev edindim. Çok gruplarda kendisi hakkında böyle olumsuz konuşulduğunu duyunca, dediğim gibi ben CHP'li bir aileden geliyorum. Namık amca Demokrat Partiliydi. Babam 27 Mayıs ihtilalinde benim elimden tutarak sokaklara çıktık ve çok mutlu oldu 27 Mayıs yapıldı diye ve 27 Mayıs'ta marşlar söylenirken 1968 yılında da vefat etti. Yani çok ilerici bir insandı ama ona rağmen Namık amcayla o kadar iyi bir ilişkileri vardı ki ta ilkokuldan başlayan ve ona yapılan bu haksızlığı da duyunca çok üzülüyorum ben. Çünkü gözünden yaş geldiğini bizzat çocuk olarak gözlemledim ve çok üzülmüştüm. Koskoca insan niye ağlıyor acaba diye. O zaman anlamadım. Daha sonra büyüdükçe okudum kitaplardan ve ona karşı çok büyük bir haksızlık yapıldığını görünce böyle katıldığım ortamlarda da bu yanlışı düzeltmek istedim.
Sağ olun Nilgün Hanım. I don't know if everyone speaks Turkish here, but I don't know how we switch to Turkish, right? There may be some people don't speak Turkish. So
Herkes konuşuyor mu Türkçe?
I don't know. I see some people, not non-Turkish names here. They may not be speaking Turkish, so I think we should stick to English.
Okay, I was going to say it's unrelated to today's topic, but people, we had such values in those days. I know the same thing, you know, I think my father was also JHP, so everyone thought that that was fair that Adnan Menderes was taken down and all this. Then you compare him to leaders today, you know, he was an angel, I think, you know, yeah. I was thinking about that. And then you can't get them to admit anything. You can't get them to be punished in any way. And that poor man.
There's another question. LTC President Nilay is asking. She says, "You said you never felt outsider while you were growing up in Turkey. What about the current generation, young Jewish generation in Turkey? Do you think they feel the same way?"
Well, personally, I haven't lived there in 42 years, but I'll tell you something. When my mother and my sister married a Muslim, my parents were devastated, and you know, like, oh, it was a disgrace or whatever. That was 1974, something like that. Today, 50% of Jewish young people, 50% intermarry anyone and everyone. So I'm thinking that obviously nobody feels uncomfortable about either their spouses. I know I have several friends, relatives, they all had big weddings. It was, so I don't know. I've never heard anyone say. First of all, the new generation has changed terribly. It's not the same generation. We're not shutting our mouths because of afraid of the British or anyone else. So everyone is speaking up, first of all. And I see things that if they had told me 50 years ago, this is going to happen. People didn't talk about religion. Now, I mean, the last 20 years, I've been seeing Hanukkahs being lit in the middle of, I don't know, Taksim Square or Turkiye, and then the Jews are throwing iftar sofraları to this and vice versa. Who is it? Even Erdogan is coming to congratulate Passover, this and that. So, and I see that every little thing, the young generation, oh no, we don't like that. You shouldn't have said that, and so on. So it's not the same generation that would. I mean, if someone says something about whatever, the Jews, they're all up in arms, you know, it's because of this and that, you don't know, how dare you, whatever. So it's not the same. We didn't dare. I mean, I know they didn't dare in the past. So.
The world changed so much, you know. It's
Yes.
not anymore the way that we grew up.
No, yes. I mean,
Turkey also, I think, is doing very, very good things. But unfortunately, the aliyah, that the moving from the Jews, our young generations are going out to study, to do all those things. That's right. And assimilation, like Rose said, is 50%, perhaps more than 50%. And but I wanted to share with you very small things that we go to Bodrum every summer to spend there. Bodrum is our love, you know, and everything. So this year I saw a cemetery that was a writing. A couple of years ago I saw this. It says Foreigners Cemetery, Foreigners Cemetery. And I start to check. All the songs are in Hebrew. Yeah, and then we said, oh my gosh. And I called there. There is a rabbi there. There is a couple of people. I said, do you know that? You know? And they called. They said, this is all songs. And this year when I went there, it says, Jewish cemetery is taken care by the Milas Belediyesi.
Oh, there you are.
They are doing which I wish that I supported. Yeah, that's
exactly what I was thinking. The new generation really is very outspoken.
Zoom open, close participants panel.
Latife Hanım, sanırım söylemek istediğiniz bir şey mi var Latife Hanım? Siz anladınız.
Evet, bir türlü çıkaramadım. Nasıl konuşayım? Ben genellikle İstanbul'da Büyükada'da Yahudiler tercih etmişler ve orada, sinagog da orada. Onu soracaktım. Neden adaları tercih ettiler diye.
Ben bildiğim kadarıyla anlatayım. Büyükada zamanında, Otoman zamanında zaten Rumların yaşadığı bir yerdi. Rumların yazlık evleri olan bir yerdi. Ondan sonra Yahudilerin belki bir kısmı Romaniyot kökenli olanlar özellikle rahatlıkla Büyükada'yı seçmişlerdi. Olarak bütün adalarda zaten azınlıklar var. Ama
en çok Jewish var. En çok Jewish var. Sinagog'da var orada da onun için sordum.
Tabii sinagogda var.
Diye, evet.
De var. Ama eskiden daha da çoktu. Şimdi daha çok millet tabii şeye de gidiyor. İşte Bodrum'a gidiyor, Marmaris'e gidiyor.
Evet.
Ama eskiden...
Heybeliada'da da 2 tane sinagog vardı. Çünkü ben çocukluktan beri Heybeliada'da 2 tane sinagog. Bir aşağıdaki, bir de arka tarafta bayramlar vardı. Büyükada'da da daha lüks, daha ne bileyim ben, işte kulübün orada olması, Anadolu kulübünün orada olması biraz daha insanları o tarafa yöneldi. Ve Heybeliada'da bazı genç kızlar, genç çocuklar asimile daha çok olacaklar diye biraz Büyükada'ya kaçmaya başladılar bir zamanlar. Onun için ama bu sene çok çok güzel bir kutlama yapıldı.
Evet.
Gördünüzse her tarafta muazzam bir kutlama yapıldı. Çok çok güzel bir kutlama. Hem Cumhuriyet Bayramı için hem de Atatürk'ün ölümü için bu kadar güzel bir müzik koroyla olamaz yani. Çok çok hoşuma gitti. Ağlamak istiyordum yani, o kadar hislendim.
Bir sualim
Esther,
var.
do you live in California?
Yes.
Sorry.
Oraya,
Oh, okay.
Bir dakika.
Yes.
Bitmedi. Bir sualim daha
Buyurun.
var.
Buyurun.
Uran şeysi size Jewish historisinde acaba bir grubun soyadları mı? Neden soruyorum? Annem Beypazarı'nda çok yakın bir tane sinagog var. O sinagogun yanında doğuyor ve ismi soyadları Uran. Ben DNA testimi yaptırdım. Bu Uran soyadının duyduktan, sinagog falan duydum, bir araştırayım diye. %79 Sefardim Jewish çıktı. Rabbi'ye sordum. Bunun şeysi ne olabilir diye, ya neticesi. Oradaki sinagoga dedi çok yakın, eğer oturuyorsa belki orada doğduğu için olmuş dedi. Fakat benim sualim değişik bir şey. Uranlar, isim soyadları Uran. Bunu Jewish gruplarında duydunuz mu hiç? Uran.
Ben Uran koymadım. Ben soyadları çok tabii ki Vutsat'la çalıştığım için yani Uran'ı Aron olabilir. Uran sonra o da olabilir. Yani zamanla çünkü biraz değişiyor.
Evet. Soyadları Uran.
Aron olabilir. Aron oldu. Fakat zamanla Uran'a dönüşmüş olabilir. Yani. Mesela benim soyadım, genç kızlık soyadım Şerez. Şerez biliyoruz ki İspanya'da küçücük Jerez diye bir köydü. Ama Türkiye'ye geldiğimde Şerez. Halbuki Ş harfi değildi. Yani Şerez, belki sen biliyorsun Ros, Şerez soyadı.
Tabii.
Evet. Ya, but Jerez'dir. Yani X harfi veya J harfi Türkçe'de olmadığı için Ş harfini kullandılar. Onun için böyle bir değişiklik olabilir sizin soyadınızda.
Şimdi de annem mesela su içerken, yemek değil de su içerken elini başına koyar içeride. Bunun bazı şekilleri nerede olur? Ben İsrail'e gittim. Ve orada eşim Yahudi olduğu için orada akrabalarım var. Sister-in-law falan var. Oraya gittim. Bazı hareketleri, bizim eskiden annemin falan öğrendiği hareketler, onlar da ellerini başlarına koyuyorlar. Yani oradan el başına, su içerken, yemek yerken el başına, onları görünce oradan yaptım, şaşırdım. Acaba hani oradaki Uran grubu öyle bir şekilde olabilir mi? Yahudi grubu olabilir mi diye.
Mesela convert olabilir. Selaniklilerden dediğimiz gruplardan olabilir. Birçok gruplar var ki hala küçük küçük örf adetleri tutuyorlar fakat din olarak değiller. Rose belki
evet.
Doğrudur, evet. Dönmelerde bazen isimler öyle oluyor. Bir de soyadı kanunu çıkınca bazen Türkçe soyadı alanlar da oldu artık. Yani.
Bir de Judaism dinlerden, sorry, should we speak Turkish or English? Sorry. Murat.
I should stick to English because I don't know if everyone can understand Turkish. So we should stick to English.
I think Judaism is not just the religion. It is kind of, it is ancestry, like your genes. Muslims, we don't share the same DNA if someone converts. But if they don't practice Judaism, but still they are Jew, right? Because it is their kind of heritage. So it is kind of different than other religions. So because you are following the Judaism, your DNA also Jewish. So it's kind of very integrated.
Yes, that's it's common because sometimes they sit as a religion. I think some of them that they are not religion. I'm not so practitioner or my
I think
son.
it is cultural, so yeah.
Cultural.
It came from the father to in Hebrew, we said the dor bador, you know, from the generation to generation, we passed it. And it was also for many, many years, for centuries, for 3,000 years, they were living always close community in ghettos, all together, and not marriage outside. So they kept the DNA very clean and clear. And you know, DNA is only 15 or 16 kind of blood that they have. You know, it's almost everybody has to come from Abraham or Yitzhak and Yaakov, and then after is Jesus or Muhammad. You know, that the main humanity started many, many years ago, 3,400, even 5,000. You know.
Gotcha.
So
Burak, are you still here, Burak Gatenio? Because he brings us for the Jewish community. He is fantastic. Burak, are you on the call?
I think
The list.
yeah, Burak.
Yeah, I see him, but I don't know if he's in front of the laptop.
I know very well him, and his mom is my cousin.
He is fantastic, and I love his family, all those from Turkey, so he can also bring us some new ideas.
There, Burak,
Burak.
are you there?
Okay, he needs to unmute. Burak, you need to unmute yourself. Meantime, I have a quick question for Rose. Rose, you speak multiple languages, 5, I remember. What about your kids? Your kids and your grandkids, do they speak multiple languages too?
No, I did talk Turkish to them when they were kids. My older daughter just a little bit, but the younger one even less. No, they don't.
They're Americanized, huh?
So here is we got Burak Gatenio.
Burak is here.
He's here.
Hello, everyone. How are you doing?
Good.
So,
Good to see you.
likewise, thank you. I'm taking care of my 7-year-old, and in the meantime, playing with him. First of all, let me congratulate Rose Kohen. It was an amazing program, and congratulate you on the books. Yes, Sibel, thank you for the compliments. What can I say for you?
So I don't know, you know the culture very well for the young generation, and then your sisters, they are in Turkey. So this transition, how about living in Turkey right now, being in a minority, or I don't want to call minority because I don't believe in social diversity myself, but how about the situation in Turkey right now? You know much better than us.
Zoom meeting locked. Zoom meeting.
Okay, go ahead, please, Burak.
Okay, so the situation in Turkey is in a very interesting stage. There are different levels of it. At the government level, you know that the Turkish ambassador is going to Israel in about 10 days. And as a matter of fact, in about 2 weeks' time, December 12th, Izzet Keribar will have the Turkish synagogues exhibit in Tel Aviv as a first event to be held by the Turkish ambassador. So it's very nice, very grandiose opening for the Turkish ambassador coming to duty. And let me tell you, Izzet Keribar told me also that Yunus Emre Institute has invited them over to 6 different countries to promote the Jewish Turkish identity. So at the government level, this is fantastic. Turkish Jewish community leaders, that we have 2 co-presidents at the moment, they attended the trip to Washington and New York with our president, and they were supporting all the relationship interfacing with the American Jewish leadership. So that's also great. At the people's level, it's a little different. There are a lot of newcomers to Istanbul that are not originally from Istanbul. They are not originally from the days that we were there. Besides the Syrians, besides the Afghanis, there are so many people that are moving there, they've never seen Jew before. And because they don't know the culture, there are some hostility in personal relationships, in some personal interactions. Can it be avoided? Yes, of course. But that has to go with the denomination of the people and how they really take it. It is very difficult to control it. It is happening small incidents on a daily basis. However, last Sunday, as you know, there was an attack in Taksim area. At the same time, it was the Turkish Jewish Heritage Week. Big exhibit, concerts and conferences were held in Neve Shalom and in the vicinity. And also, I can share with you that it was the 19th year of commemoration of 24 people killed by Al-Qaeda attack to Neve Shalom and Beit Israel synagogues. So the Turkish authorities were there present and they were participating in the commemoration. Unfortunately, those 24 souls that were laid to rest, some of them were just bystanders, some of them were living in the neighborhood. They were not the real targets, maybe, but they were all murdered. So that's all I can say right now. I mean, things are in a very good projection, coming along very well.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
It is, I mean, it is really difficult in Turkey now. It's not only anti-Jewish. I mean, there is a hostility to even Turks that that have been in Istanbul or that are uncovered, or, you know, that are a little different than what the Syrians, Afghanis, or even just, you know, ignorant Turks expect. So I'm not sure that, you know, I'm sure that it said added extra hostility against Jews, but those people just came to Turkey, you know, with their rage in their hearts. And it's really, really not, you know, the Turkey that I grew up in. Even 10 years ago, it was different. But now it's just such a critical mass of new people that you feel, you know, I feel a foreigner in my country in some cases, like, you know, where I don't belong here anymore.
Unfortunately, we are all minorities right now.
And the government is against secular Turks, unfortunately.
Just different manners.
Yeah, I need to share this also. It's not only in Turkey. Unfortunately, this Thursday, just we came from Bodrum, 13 hours flight with Turkish Airlines. And me and my husband, we were the only one that were like, they were full 500 people in the airplane from Afghanistan, Syrian, and with people that never I can imagine. They are coming to United States full of plane, and only 2 couples are there, like me and the other couple. So it's not only for Turkey this, it's for United States also the same thing. And everybody were in front of me, they were American citizen or green cards, or they had the real to come to United States. And that's I wanted to share because I saw it is the same thing going here too. The world is changing. The world is.
Did Feride have a question? I see your hand up.
Sorry.
I want to ask you, both of you. My parents, for some reason, named me Vega. I know the reason. It's the brightest star, and my mother was an astronomer. So they named me Vega. And just because of that, I sometimes used to be exposed to very rude behavior, like by government officials or so. Like, you know, and I'm not sure why, you know, sometimes there would be like, you know, what are you? They want to put you in that square or the round peg.
Well, it was not an Arabic name. It was not Turkish. It was not Persian. So you had to be a foreigner.
Yeah, exactly. But, you know, even if they wanted to know that, they were rude about it. So I just wondered whether you were exposed to this, like, you know, what are you? Or sometimes that you don't belong, or maybe I just met a couple of rude people. I don't know, but.
Can I answer to this? First of all, we have a beautiful name, Becca. What I want to tell you, I've been exposed to many times when I had to show my ID, and they will look at my ID. They will go through the whole lines back and forth, and they say, oh, it says Jewish. Then they will look at me. You don't look Jewish. And then they will look at my name. Why your name is Baruch, your first name? Because it is. What kind of name it is? And then what are you doing here? Yeah, I got that many times.
Okay.
You got it in the United States or in Turkey?
In Turkey, yeah.
Turkey. I have also something that my father used to tell me when I was born and went there to do my ID, my nufus, and it says mother's name Estrella, father's name Israel, and the daughter name Esther. And the guy said, Estrella, change the name, normal name. Get it, the difference, Estrella, Israel, and sir, change the name, normal name.
Esther could be Ayşe.
Okay. Feride keeps
We're still waiting. Feride has been waiting
patiently. Getting taller and taller. Feride, yourself.
Thank you, Rose, for the wonderful presentation. My question is more, I like personal stories, family stories. So I was wondering if, besides using Judeo-Spanish language to keep connected to your roots in Turkey, was there any tradition or a ritual, or it could be a song, a dance, or a culinary something that passed down from generation to generation in Turkey that you use to stay connected to your roots? And was there some of those that you brought here and you've been using in order to pass it to the next generation?
I'm not a good sample of a Jewish person, I think, because I don't think I was very connected to the community there in the first place. And it was a question mark in my head. First I thought maybe it was because of finances. It was not a good period inside the Jewish community at the time. The community in the 50s, 60s had become very materialistic. So this is all gone, thank God, you know, it's not there. They had those rituals of dowry and giving dowry and so on that kind of bothered some of us. So I wasn't too much into the Jewish. So I think we were a family, maybe we were also a small family. We were alienated in some way. But the reason I started writing is again because there was something emotional about the language that it felt more like home or my mother, because she really spoke Judeo-Spanish most of her. This is where she expressed herself more. But some of the beliefs, of course, I carry. Maybe sarcasm, something I think the language that they spoke at home was a lot of times sarcastic. So I'm trying to think what else. Of course, there are foods that they particularly liked and did. I still carry that. And I'm always calling my grandchildren with funny names like they used to call children. Did I answer your question? I don't know. Yeah, I mean, some of it, you know, but it's not I'm not fully, I don't feel like I'm fully Jewish, because the more I lived in the United States, I certainly realized that I'm more Turkish than I'm Jewish. Or it's very hard to separate them when you, I don't know what it is. It's really hard to separate them. And you see that when you live as an immigrant somewhere. So what do I have in common with Americans? A little. What do I have in common with other people or with other Jews in the United States? Certainly none, literally none. So,
how about the Persian Jews? Are they similar here in Westwood? I live in Westwood, California. So here there are so many Persian Jews.
But
so
they're
are
Mizrahi, most of them.
I'm not sure that they're as cosmopolitan as the Jews or Istanbulus are. I haven't really met, I mean, I've met some Jewish Persians. I think they have very large and very rooted families. Maybe I'm wrong, I'm not sure.
But also culturally, they're Mizrahi, so they're very different.
They're not Sephardic, you're right. Yeah. And they've lived in, just like when the exile started in whatever it was, 2,000 years ago, those Persians were always there, the Persian Jews.
Yeah.
Yes, they probably are a lot like the rest of the Persians. That's my understanding. They couldn't be very different than the rest of the Persians because they always lived with the Persians in one place. The only thing it could be, maybe they're more middle class than other Persians.
Mm-hmm. How about Sephardic Jews? They are in what countries, like in Turkey, Spain, or is there any specific countries for the Sephardic Jews?
Well, they're not in Turkey alone, but the language survived better in Turkey. They were in Greece. They disappeared during the Shoah, the Holocaust. They were in Macedonia, Romania, all those countries, Yugoslavia, in Italy. They are in North Africa. They also speak Judeo-Spanish, but they have different names. They call it something Judeo-Arabo. Haketia. They have all kinds of names. No, they're everywhere. They're not only in Turkey. It's only some. And some of the Ashkenazim probably have Sephardic roots that live north of Europe. That's my guess.
I think wherever was the Ottoman Empire at that time, till far away, all the places that Ottoman Empire was, and they have Sephardic people speaking Ladino.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. And I think in South America, in Argentina, bigger cities.
Yeah.
We have a friend here from Ankara. Joseph, would you like to say something?
Joseph?
I don't know if you heard me.
I would like to read a comment here. Anne White says, so happy to see your presentation, Rose. We send our love to you. Is Joseph with us?
He is. He was, but I don't know.
Unmute yourself, please.
He's here. Unmute. He can unmute himself.
Yes, I asked him to unmute. Let's see if he's in front of his computer still. Meantime, any other questions?
I'm still here, but I don't know what question you were asking.
Do you have?
I just wanted to know if you would like to add something to Rose or Esther's comments. You're from Ankara.
Yes, so I was born in Ankara, but one of the things that came up from what I heard had to do with the names of Jews, that people were saying, what kind of a name is this? I've noticed lately over the years that the Muslims are giving their children first names that I've never heard of in my life. So there are so many odd first names. How could they possibly tell who's Jewish or who's what?
That's so true. Yes, that's true.
Yes.
And I can say something that my sons, both sons, they are here in America. They came when they finished the high school and they came to university, to Berkeley. So one is Aslan Alkamli, the other one is Izzet Alkamli. So there is nothing Jewish name, but when we go to the temple, said, "What is your Jewish name?" I said, Yehuda El Yakim. Yeah, we change it, in Turkey, everybody, like Burak, like everybody, we are changing the name.
They didn't change their names in the United States. Interesting. They kept Izzet and
Aslan, yes. And they asked him if they wanted to change, but you are born with this name and everybody knows on this name and your friends knows this name and suddenly you become Michael or I don't know, John. Aslan cannot be John.
Exactly.
Well, my Muslim Turkish friends in the United States, the kids that are born here, we all are trying to give a name that's either easy for Americans or, yes, for example, if it's a name like Yağız, they tell you, no, don't name Yağız. Nobody will be able to read it. So.
That's true. Or Ufuk, Shafak, all those names.
Yeah. Ufuk is the
Those
worst.
are the dangerous
And
ones.
Ufuk is the worst one for the calling.
Yeah, that's right. It was very, very nice to
Thank you.
you.
Same to you. I'm so glad to see you.
Yes. It was nice.
Rose.
I'm sorry, Rose. I just would like to know if you are familiar with this book. It's called The American Sephardic Elite, and it's called The Grandees. The Grandees.
I have that book.
The American Sephardic Elite?
Yes.
It's the history of the Sephardim that first arrived in the United States. Evidently, the first group of Sephardim that arrived were very educated and very prominent and very rich. So there was a period of time where they were more prominent than the Ashkenazim. And then more Ashkenazim came in and things changed.
Yeah. But it's a very fascinating book. They even loaned money to George Washington.
Mm-hmm.
So it's historically very interesting.
So are they a Sephardic from the Ottoman Empire or more like Middle Europe or?
Well,
it's the ones that came from Spain.
They came with during the conquest, during Columbus's time, and they financed basically.
Exactly.
Donna Gracia.
Yes.
Donna Gracia.
Because there are a lot of conversos that came.
Yeah. Yes. And there is another book about her that the name is The Lady Who Defined the Kings.
Yes,
right.
yes.
Yeah.
I'm familiar.
Was a banker. Her husband was a very, very famous banker in Spain. And when he died and the Inquisition started, they moved to Ottoman Empire.
That's right.
And some of them, I read this book. Yeah, it's interesting, very interesting book.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
And she was the one when he was doing some business. She used to not tax, but this tax was giving to Ottoman Empire to buy a piece of land in Israel.
Yes.
Because she wanted to start a deal from that time, and she wanted to buy properties there. as mortgage business was doing. It's very interesting book, very, very interesting book.
Yeah. Well, she was a very shrewd woman.
She was.
Yeah.
With her nephew also. He has a nephew, yes.
Joseph.
Yeah. She was like the banker on that time.
Yeah.
Broker. Yeah.
Well, it's 8 o'clock.
Very nice. And I have to go.
Yes, it's 8 o'clock. Rose, I would like to thank you,
thank you for
all this
inviting
information
me.
necessary to you too. We enlightened us. Thank you everyone for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you for accepting Rose.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Again. Good night.
It was really great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you everybody for the comments.